Welcome to Deep Dive into Prophecy, History, and Modern-Day Events. Today's burning question: is Iran, ancient Persia, fulfilling biblical prophecy against Israel? From Ezekiel to Daniel, from Isaiah to Revelation, scholars, theologians, and political analysts alike are re-examining ancient scriptures through the lens of today's headlines. What does the Bible really say about Persia's role in the end times? Is the current tension between Iran and Israel just political or profoundly prophetic? Stick with us until the end as we unravel the Persian mystery. The nation of Persia, known today as Iran, holds a significant place in biblical prophecy, particularly in the context of the end times. One of the most striking references is found in Ezekiel chapter 38, where Persia is listed among a coalition of nations that will rise against Israel in the latter days. This prophecy, written more than 500 years ago, names Persia alongside Gog-Magog, Cush, Put, Gomer, and Beth Togarmah. These ancient names correspond to regions and nations that today roughly align with Russia, Turkey, Libya, Sudan, and parts of Central Asia. The inclusion of Persia in this coalition is especially notable because it is the only one among these nations that still retains its ancient biblical name. This fact alone has led many scholars, theologians, and students of prophecy to pay special attention to Iran's modern actions and alignments. Ezekiel's prophecy describes a time when Israel is living in apparent peace and security, only to be suddenly threatened by a vast military alliance. The motive of this coalition is described as a plundering raid, aimed at taking advantage of Israel's wealth and strategic position. Persia's participation in this alliance suggests that it will play a leading role in this future conflict. What makes this prophecy particularly compelling in today's world is Iran's open hostility toward Israel and its repeated calls for the Jewish state's destruction. Iranian leaders have consistently referred to Israel as a cancer that must be removed, and have backed these words with action, funding and arming militant groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and various Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. The specific naming of Persia by Ezekiel indicates that this is not a generic or symbolic prophecy, but rather a concrete prediction of future geopolitical alignments. This adds weight to the argument that Iran's current behavior may be a fulfillment of ancient prophecy. Critics argue that such interpretations are speculative, but it is difficult to dismiss the uncanny parallels between the biblical text and modern headlines. Iran is one of the few nations that openly defies Israel on both religious and political grounds, seeing itself as a leader of the Islamic world and a champion of resistance against Zionism. This self-image aligns with its potential role in leading a broad coalition against Israel, as described in Ezekiel. Moreover, the prophecy's timing is referred to as "in the latter days," a phrase often associated with the end of the age or the final chapter of human history before divine intervention. This temporal marker is crucial, as it suggests the prophecy was not fulfilled in the ancient past, but is awaiting fulfillment in a time yet to come. The fact that Israel has returned to its land and established a sovereign state after nearly 2,000 years of exile makes the fulfillment of this prophecy even more plausible. According to Ezekiel, the coalition, including Persia, will be drawn into an invasion, not because of political decisions alone, but because God will put hooks into their jaws and bring them forth. This suggests a divine orchestration of events using geopolitical tensions to fulfill a predetermined plan. In recent years, Iran has developed close military and economic ties with Russia and Turkey, two other nations often associated with the Ezekiel 38 prophecy. Joint military exercises, arms deals, and shared interests in the Syrian conflict have brought these countries into closer cooperation. This triad mirrors the alliance described in the biblical text, further reinforcing the view that the stage is being set for a prophetic fulfillment. While it is essential to approach such interpretations with caution and humility, the convergence of ancient scripture and modern events cannot be ignored. The mention of Persia in prophecy is not an isolated reference, but part of a broader biblical narrative that points to a climactic confrontation involving Israel and its surrounding enemies. For those who study prophecy, Iran's role is a key piece of the puzzle, suggesting that we may be closer than ever to witnessing these ancient words come to life. Iran's stance against Israel is deeply rooted in both historical ideology and spiritual undertones that transcend modern politics. To understand whether this animosity is merely a product of contemporary geopolitics or a continuation of a much older narrative, one must consider the religious, cultural, and prophetic layers involved. The modern Islamic Republic of Iran views Israel not just as a geopolitical rival, but as a theological adversary. Since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Iran has pursued a revolutionary ideology that combines Shia Islamic eschatology with anti-Zionism. Iranian leaders have consistently portrayed Israel as an illegitimate entity occupying Islamic land, and their commitment to Israel's destruction is enshrined in official doctrine. This enmity goes beyond political alliances or territorial disputes. It is seen as a sacred duty by the Iranian leadership, particularly by those who believe in ushering in the return of the Mahdi, the Shia messianic figure. This messianic belief system plays a significant role in shaping Iran's foreign policy, especially regarding Israel. Certain Iranian clerics and political leaders interpret regional conflict as a necessary precursor to the return of the Mahdi. In their view, the destruction of Israel is not only desirable, but divinely mandated. This belief gives Iran's hostility a religious intensity that differs from typical political disputes. While many nations have political disagreements or strategic rivalries, Iran's rhetoric and actions against Israel are steeped in apocalyptic language and spiritual justification. This theological motivation gives Iran a unique and dangerous position in the Middle East and aligns closely with the prophetic narratives found in the Bible. The Book of Daniel, in particular, provides insight into the spiritual forces that may be influencing modern nations. In Daniel chapter 10, a spiritual being speaks of being delayed by the Prince of Persia, a spiritual entity opposing God's will. This passage suggests that behind the political power of Persia, there was a spiritual force working against divine plans. When this concept is viewed through the lens of today's events, it raises profound questions. Could there still be a spiritual power at work behind modern Iran, continuing an ancient resistance to God's purposes? While such interpretations may seem speculative, the consistency of opposition to Israel from the Persian realm, both ancient and modern, is striking. Iran's support for terror proxies across the Middle East further reinforces the idea that its strategy is not merely defensive or nationalistic, but part of a broader ideological and possibly spiritual agenda. Groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis are not just aligned with Iran politically, but are tools in its long-standing campaign to encircle and pressure Israel. These groups often carry out attacks, spread anti-Israel propaganda, and destabilize regions in alignment with Iran's overarching goal of weakening and eventually destroying the Jewish state. This widespread network of influence shows that Iran's approach is strategic, deeply planned, and consistent with the idea of a long-term ideological war rather than short-term political maneuvering. Additionally, Iran's military investments and regional alliances support the view that it is preparing for a much larger conflict. It is not merely reacting to threats, but actively shaping the battlefield. It has built infrastructure in Syria, transferred precision-guided missiles to Lebanon, and entrenched its forces near Israel's borders. These developments are not isolated incidents, but part of a broader campaign that could align with the coalition described in Ezekiel 38. If Iran views itself as a leader of resistance and sees its actions as fulfilling divine prophecy, then its involvement in a future military alliance against Israel becomes more than likely. It becomes inevitable from their perspective. This combination of spiritual belief, historical legacy, and strategic aggression creates a uniquely dangerous dynamic. Iran is not acting only out of political interest or national pride, but out of a conviction that its mission is divinely sanctioned. Such a worldview makes diplomatic resolution extremely difficult because the underlying motivations go beyond what can be resolved through treaties or negotiations. When a nation believes it is fulfilling prophecy, its actions are no longer bound by conventional rules. This perspective not only explains Iran's unyielding stance against Israel, but also aligns it closely with the prophetic descriptions found in Scripture, suggesting that the hostility we see today may indeed be part of a larger, more ancient battle between divine purposes and spiritual opposition. In recent years, the escalating tensions between Iran and Israel have closely mirrored prophetic imagery found in the book of Ezekiel, especially chapter 38. This section of Scripture describes a sudden and large-scale invasion of Israel by a coalition of nations, with Persia being one of the key players. The context provided in Ezekiel paints Israel as a land of apparent peace and prosperity, described as a nation of unwalled villages, living securely. This depiction resonates strongly with modern Israel's current state. Despite facing threats on multiple fronts, Israel has achieved remarkable success in terms of technology, economy, and military strength. It is seen as a thriving nation in an otherwise turbulent region, much like the peaceful and unsuspecting land mentioned in the prophecy. Iran's role in fostering instability around Israel through its support of militant groups and its entrenchment in Syria has created an environment ripe for potential conflict. Israel's northern border with Lebanon is heavily influenced by Hezbollah, an Iranian-backed militia with a vast arsenal of rockets aimed at Israeli cities. In Gaza, Hamas operates with financial and military assistance from Iran, carrying out regular attacks and creating ongoing security threats. In Syria, Iran has established military bases and transported advanced weaponry through its alliance with the Assad regime. These strategic moves allow Iran to encircle Israel and apply pressure from multiple directions. From a prophetic perspective, this multi-front approach could be seen as preparation for a future assault similar to the one described in Ezekiel. The alliance forming between Iran, Russia, and Turkey is another significant development. These nations, while historically having diverse agendas, have found common ground in opposing Western influence and supporting the Syrian government. Military cooperation, shared intelligence, and coordinated diplomatic stances have increased in recent years. This trilateral relationship bears a striking resemblance to the coalition mentioned in biblical prophecy. Although Turkey is a member of NATO, Its political shift under President Erdogan and its warming ties with Russia and Iran suggest a realignment that could fit into the end-time scenario described in Scripture. Iran's involvement with Russia, especially in military contexts such as the Syrian civil war and arms deals, also points to a prophetic alignment forming in real time. Israel's preemptive actions against Iranian targets in Syria, covert cyber operations against Iran's nuclear facilities, and intelligence campaigns all indicate a growing sense of urgency. These actions are aimed at delaying or preventing what Israeli leaders view as existential threats. Yet, these defensive measures might also be seen as fulfilling the part of Ezekiel's vision, where Israel is living in a state of confidence, unaware of the looming coalition preparing to strike. The prophecy's depiction of a surprise invasion matches the unpredictable and volatile nature of today's regional politics, where a single miscalculation could escalate into a large-scale conflict. Furthermore, the language used in Ezekiel 38 is not ambiguous. It specifically mentions the nations involved, their geographical directions, and their intent. The prophecy emphasizes that this coalition will come, like a storm, and like a cloud covering the land, suggesting a massive and overwhelming force. Iran's growing missile capabilities, its investment in drone technology, and its collaboration with other hostile actors align with the vision of a sudden, powerful, and coordinated assault. The threat is no longer theoretical. Iran's nuclear program continues to advance despite international sanctions and negotiations. And Israeli officials have repeatedly warned that a nuclear-armed Iran would cross a red line that Israel cannot allow. The stage appears to be set. Israel is thriving yet increasingly surrounded by adversaries. Iran is ideologically committed and militarily preparing. And regional alliances are shifting in a way that resembles ancient prophetic warnings. Whether or not one views these developments through a religious lens, the geopolitical patterns are undeniable. The parallels between Scripture and current events are too significant to ignore. Many believe that we are witnessing the slow but steady alignment of nations and motives that could one day culminate in the fulfillment of Ezekiel's prophecy. Iran's moves in Syria, its deepening ties with other anti-Israel regimes, and its religious fervor all serve as compelling indicators that the road to Ezekiel 38 may already be under construction. The prophetic implications of Iran's modern actions against Israel extend far beyond the borders of the Middle East, suggesting a broader global significance that demands discernment and awareness from people around the world. Biblical prophecy, particularly in passages like Ezekiel 38, is not merely a regional forecast, but a divine revelation that touches on the fate of nations and the unfolding of a global spiritual narrative. The involvement of Persia, or modern-day Iran, in an end-times coalition against Israel is more than just a historical reference. It is a signpost pointing to a larger prophetic timetable that concerns the entire world. As tensions between Iran and Israel grow, and as global alliances shift in dramatic ways, the possibility of a prophetic fulfillment becomes increasingly relevant, not only for believers but for political analysts, historians, and ordinary citizens seeking to understand the times. One of the most critical aspects of biblical prophecy is the call to discernment. The Bible does not present these future events merely for prediction or speculation, but as warnings and indicators of spiritual realities. In the case of Iran's role in prophecy, the Scriptures suggest that the nations involved are not simply moving according to their political interests, but are being drawn into divine orchestration. God says in Ezekiel that he will put hooks into their jaws and bring them against Israel. This indicates that even the most calculated political decisions may be influenced by a higher power to bring about an appointed end. For those watching world events, this is a sobering reminder that history is not random or cyclical, but directed toward a specific prophetic fulfillment. From a global perspective, the Iran-Israel conflict could serve as a catalyst for broader international involvement. Many countries are already indirectly involved through arms deals, sanctions, and diplomatic support. Should a major conflict erupt, it would likely draw in world powers and could destabilize global markets, energy supplies, and political structures. This kind of upheaval could set the stage for further prophetic events described in the Bible, such as the rise of a global leader, a new world order, or unprecedented warfare. The involvement of Russia and Turkey, both of whom have extensive influence in global politics, further intensifies the potential for widespread impact. The prophecy of Ezekiel 38 is not just about a local invasion. It is a preview of global turmoil and divine judgment. For those who believe in biblical prophecy, these developments also come with a spiritual imperative. Jesus, in the New Testament, urged his followers to watch for the signs of the times and not be caught unaware. The convergence of modern events with ancient prophecies serves as a wake-up call to live with spiritual readiness. It's not enough to be informed about political developments. One must also be prepared spiritually, morally, and mentally. Prophecy is not meant to breed fear, but to inspire faith, urgency, and commitment. It reminds believers that God is sovereign over nations, and that his word will not return void. Iran's fulfillment of prophecy, if indeed it is unfolding as described in Scripture, brings with it the need for a global reassessment of priorities. It challenges nations to consider their stance toward Israel, a nation that plays a central role in God's plan. It also calls individuals to seek truth beyond headlines and politics, and to align themselves with the eternal purposes of God. The events that may soon unfold will not merely be of military or political consequence. They will be deeply spiritual. They may mark the beginning of a chain reaction that accelerates the final chapters of human history, as we know it. Ultimately, whether one is a scholar, a pastor, a skeptic, or simply a concerned observer, the connection between Iran's modern behavior and ancient prophecy is impossible to ignore. The question is not only whether prophecy is being fulfilled, but how we will respond. Will we dismiss it as coincidence, or will we recognize the signs and seek understanding? The call is clear: be watchful, be informed, and be ready. For the events on the world stage may be far more than they appear. They may be divine signals, echoing from the pages of Scripture into the chaos of our modern world, urging us to look beyond the temporal and prepare for what lies ahead.